How do ideas travel from one school to another? How do you communicate across a network? Teachers and experts who really know are going to tell us everything from A to Z. Across the country, there are 130 networked learning communities with over 1,500 schools in them. David Jackson is the director of the Networked Learning Group, which supports them all at the National College of School Leadership. Nikki Thomas, John Gadd, Sarah Palmer and Brian Ball are head teachers in the Think First network, one of the first funded by the National College. Charles Deforge is a professor of education and an expert in school networks. For nearly 20 years, Terry Harris has been a part of a network of small rural schools in Sussex known as the NEARS Group. All of them are involved in networked learning. This is what they've learned.
There's less teachers going on county-run courses. There's more teachers learning together and from each other within the network.
Because you've got expertise both within the group, but you've also got purchasing power. And if you put 11 schools together, you know, you can pull in good speakers.
Each of the 9 schools has committed a lead learner for half a day a week to the network. And they said, just think about it. We give away half a day and we get 4 days back.
There's a range of curriculum enrichment activities over the year for the different year groups. Exciting things like circus skills or an art day or a Harry Potter morning.
You get to go to conferences and it's really fun.
Football, basketball, netball, athletics.
And we show off our ideas and what we've been doing and we link it all together.
So wonderful opportunities for go and meet other children and compete against them.
There isn't a blueprint. I think that's really important to recognise. There were 109 network learning communities in the programme and there are no two the same. In our network learning community, headships have changed, members of staff have obviously moved on within schools. We've changed the structure of the network and how it's run and managed over time because we've had to. If you sit down and you plan it and you have an action plan and you draw a pretty diagram which is your structure and you set out to do that, I think you'll fail because you do have to have a vision for where you'd like it to be, but you probably won't be able to know how it will be that you'll get there. It's going to be a bit messy. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable and we're sort of not used to it. We've sort of been used to having the script.
Schools may be competing against each other and therefore it's quite difficult if you're really in competition with somebody. You know, it's difficult then to be 100% collaborative.
There isn't a head teacher in the country who came into the profession to lead a school at the expense of children in other schools.
We're not here for those smaller issues about who might be better than who. That is actually the opposite of what we're after. We're after who can collaborate well with who. We're not in the competition.
Collaborating with other schools, there's an enormous amount of pluses.
Because the children will gain, and that's really what it's about. It's not about the success of head teachers, it's about the success of children. Because schools notoriously don't communicate well. Busy teachers preoccupied with their own work. Not always communicating well classroom to classroom even. But we do have a number of networks who have identified or appointed a collective communication capacity. A network newsletter that every adult in the network will receive and network intranet and network website.
Different schools, different people, different situations, and I think that's the challenge, bringing those schools together.
All the schools enter as equal partners. They all have something to learn and something to contribute.
It's very important that we all feel equal and we trust each other. If we haven't got that trust, it would be quite tricky, and that's very much come about because we share the same philosophy and approach and we get on well together as people outside of school.
It's a very different model from, say, the Beacon School model, which is about, you know, here is a Beacon School, others learn from it. It's about the interdependence of learning.
Network learning communities only work when they absolutely focus on pupil achievement.
Just identify at least one thing that's fundamentally important and then concentrate your energy on looking at that.
Get that learning focus right and that everyone is behind it.
If you lose that focus, and it's easy to lose that focus, they won't work.
We've got a team of governors in each school, and we decided to basically get together based on a lot of the work that the Think First group at school level were doing, and the idea was to start sharing practice about how we do business, pretty much like the teachers do. Out of the network of governors we've sort of cottoned onto is that there's a potential for us to cross-work, cross-help them, so that if there's an area of governance at a particular school that's falling by the wayside because of just purely time commitment, then there might be other governors from our school that can go to another one. We've got one just around the corner that we're looking to try to work together and maybe do some training together.
It mustn't be a heads club. It's got to deliver for the kids. That's the absolute bottom line of it. And it's crucial, both in management terms and in philosophical terms, that everybody's involved, because everybody's involved in educating the kids.
Get as many people involved as quickly as you can and keep them involved.
It's doomed if it is just heads. At the same time, if the heads don't drive it, it's also doomed.
It's given us a chance to share ideas within the schools and borrow ideas and steal ideas so you don't have to reinvent the wheel the whole time.
There are so many ideas in the network, so I'm not thinking of my own or just with the colleagues in my school, but I'm thinking with hundreds of other people.
It's given me access to more resources and to like-minded people that you can share ideas with, basically, and then develop them in the classroom.
Children being aware is really important, and they often talk about the NEARS group, and it's an identity and it's a club that they like to belong to, and they use it in their language. Oh, it's a NEARS activity.
Lots of schools share ideas and they use them to make their schools better. Getting more computers and interactive whiteboards.
So we look at what different ideas other schools have.
And getting more playground equipment, like the trim trail over there.
And put them together to make our school better.
And stuff like the hopscotch, because we go around schools and we see stuff.
Networks don't happen by accident, that there needs to be led and coordinated and facilitated, and dedicated time for that is important. In an ideal world, some of the most successful networks actually have people leading the network for whom it is their primary professional responsibility, not something they're doing in their spare time. I mean, it seems like a complication, leading a network when we've all got school responsibilities. There's no doubt it's a tension, but you put a group of professionals around a table to talk about what's best for children and their eyes light up. What the networks actually receive is £50,000 per year for 3 years. The average network size is 11 schools. So let's say 10 because the maths is easy. That means that each school effectively gets £5,000.
Yes, of course, the funding helped. But we would have done it even if we hadn't got the funding, because we'd got to that point where, having put the bid together and decided this was a really important thing to do, if we hadn't got the money, we would have still gone ahead with it in some way, shape or form.
It's a resource that is dedicated to the network rather than owned by any individual school. And one of the things that we know from network theory is that networks require a capacity for collective decision making.
In some instances, we've funded things where not all of the schools are necessarily benefited at that particular time, but ultimately they would benefit. It's funded the release time for teachers to work together and teaching assistants. It's funded 7 joint inset days. It's funded middle leader training. It's funded inputs from national speakers on emotional intelligence or learning styles or whatever. So you get an economies of scale, because we couldn't afford as individual schools to do all of those things. And it also facilitates people getting together.
I don't know what the ideal number is. 7's been pretty good for us, or 8 at the start. I think if there were too many, it would be difficult.
I mean, some of the network learning communities in the country are enormous. And I can see, you know, certainly working with them at conferences, they've talked a lot about the difficulties with the scale of having 20, 30 schools within a group.
And too few your ideas wouldn't sort of be shared very well.
Emails fly. I mean, I don't know how you would have done this without e-communication. Particularly as in our network learning community, we are so geographically dispersed as well. And there are many that are very geographically dispersed.
The classes are emailing each other and sharing what they're doing in class and the initiatives they're kind of following through in their own schools.
We've also got an online staff room, which has taken some getting going. It's an interesting one. I think teachers are not necessarily going to buy online stuff until they're really comfortable with the face-to-face stuff. And that's just a sort of personal opinion, but I think they need to sort of know who they're sending their materials to before they send them, and they need to have that trust and that relationship before they can start swapping things sort of in the ether.
The bottom line for parents and governors is it doing our school good? And if the teachers deliver on that, I think they'll get 100% backing. And if they don't, they won't, and they won't deserve it.
In one of our networks called Winsford, every school in Winsford is in the network. Primary, secondary, special. What Winsford is endeavouring to say is, if your child goes to any school in this network, we will ensure they'll be successful, because we're working together to collaborate around that, as is the rest of the town. That's a very powerful statement. Now, the non-geographical networks, it's harder to do that with parents.
What's the effect on their actual SAT scores? Well, we don't know, and you can't fish it out, you can't tell. My guess would be it's very, very promising.
Last year, the schools in network learning communities had a greater increase in Key Stage 2 results than schools that weren't in, the whole country had a rise in standards, but network learning community primary schools increased more than non-network learning community primary schools. Yeah, it's still early days, but you'd hope that would be the case, but it was the case.
Headship can be lonely, and knowing that you're making similar mistakes together.
It allows you to develop, it allows you to share the things that you've got, and for your staff to get ideas from elsewhere.
Having a success, you can share it knowing that other colleagues will share their successes back with you.
If you can say to people, actually, have a whole day working on this project with 7 other teachers, 12 other teachers, whatever, people really appreciate that. Time is so precious that if you can give people time, they want to do this development work, they want to make a difference.
You have a much louder voice. You can completely turn around the relationship with the local authority. Rather than it driving down to its schools, the network can agree its collective aspirations and actually negotiate with the authority the kind of support it requires. And that becomes a very powerful lever.
Make sure you think about how the thing's going to be managed, because it can be a bit unwieldy and you can end up thinking this is just an awful lot of extra work and what am I getting out of it? So if you think about that in advance and you put in some extra admin time and you get the systems and the structures right, it won't feel so bad.
You've got to be clear about what's in it for you, and you've got to fight your corner. But on the other hand, for the greater good, sometimes there needs to be some sort of compromise. So, I mean, we've been through that situation, and strangely enough, where we nearly came to blows, perhaps as a group, was something absurd. It was about whether boys should play netball.